Welcome back to another edition of the Course Creation Incubator. I'm Gina Anativia, your host, here to get you stoked for your course creation and marketing. One of the ways I know that you can take the pressure off of a course launch is to have the right runway to nurture your potential students in the weeks or months leading up to you selling your course. In other words, pre-launch. Now, I've done episodes on this before. They're some of my most popular episodes, and I'll link to them in the show notes. And I thought it'd be cool to bring out another perspective to the pre-launch arena, if you will. Brenna McGowan is a new friend, and we have a ton in common, including ties back to the East Coast. Brenna is a seasoned copywriter and expert in this pre-launch area. So I wanted to bring her on to better get a sense of how to do this step by step, how to get into the minds of our potential students, how to nurture them in advance, and take the stress out of our launches. And I mentioned those ties back to the East Coast. She's from the tri-state area. I'm from New York. She's from Jersey. We both moved to California. And I love that on her website, she has the New Jersey Brenna and she has a list of bullet points and then the West Coast Brenna because I feel that vibe 100%. All right, let's get to it and listen to Brenna break down her pre-launch process. Brenna, one former East Coast girl to the other, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I love it. And I love how we have so many little parallels in our life. So
I know, it's so true. Kids who play soccer, we've got the East Coast thing. I know, and more to come, I'm sure, as we do this interview. And love that you're bringing this copywriting perspective to the podcast in terms of pre-launching. And first and foremost, for anyone new to the idea of pre-launching, what is a pre-launch? How is it different from launching?
It is the time before your launch. It depends on what you're launching. I think probably how well your audience knows you, what the dollar amount of the thing you are launching is. But, to me, it's usually the 4 to 8. Sometimes people go longer, 12 weeks before you actually launch. This is where you're kind of seeding in what's to come, but you are not in direct sales mode. When I think of a launch, especially as a copywriter, I think of, okay, it's do or die time. Right now, it's time to make a decision. Are you in, or are you out? This is a time where we can kind of massage, what we're doing, what we're offering. And what I love about pre-launch too is we can do it in a really fun way because we're not trying to squish, 17 emails into 10 days, right? All of a sudden we have time to kind of be ourselves, talk about what's going on with our course and get people interested in what we're about to sell.
Okay, I love it. And do you feel like pre-launching is best for certain types of course creators? I already have a decent list, or maybe it's better for people who are just starting out. Who do you think is best for it?
I think it's for everyone. I don't think you can go wrong with a pre-launch. I think if you are just starting out, you absolutely need a pre-launch. You need to let people know what's coming. People that may not understand, I think we take for granted a lot of times since we're so entrenched in our own businesses. And I do this too, even though I'm on both sides. I write for people, but I have my own business and my own course program that I'm launching, that you forget that people don't really realize what you do like you think they do, right? So if you're brand new, you definitely want to spread the word. And I think if you're someone who has an established course, it's even better because I think once again, people are just busy. I think we can actually, with a pre-launch, get we can kind of delve into our list instead of constantly looking for new leads. Maybe there's leads that, were that didn't come and actually buy from us last time. Maybe we can start pulling those people in and getting them excited for the launch that we're about to have.
All right, let's dig in a little bit. I wanted you on because you're going to talk through some of the steps or how I should plan for a pre-launch. So where do we start?
Well, because I'm a copywriter, we always start with voice of customer, right? We always start with research. We always start with looking at data. So when I work with clients one-on-one on this, and even in the program that I'm going to be doing, helping people with this, we start to go, okay, let's collect as much data. Every pre-launch I start off with a Jeff Walker PLF style. And I've never taken PLF, I've just read the book, but he surveys people to kind of collect objections, right? And it's like, okay, let's survey our people. And it's a great way to get people to kind of see in once again what we're about to do, but also to start collecting information. I always go and do, like, whether it's looking for people's comments on Instagram, asking marketing questions, or I'm sorry, market research questions on stories, sending emails where I'm asking questions. So as much data as we can collect, as a copywriter, I've always know if I'm stuck on a project, it's because I haven't gotten enough information. And I think the same thing goes for content, right? A lot of times we're like, I don't know what to say to my customer. I don't quite know. It's because we haven't done enough research. When we do enough research and we truly understand people's objections to why they're not buying from us, we truly can empathize with their pain points. When we can delve in and help shift the beliefs that they're thinking, and we collect enough research ahead of time, all of a sudden we know what to put into our pre-launch because we've done our research upfront. The other thing too, on the other side of that, is looking at data. Now, I want to say, like, I'm super great at data. Like, this isn't probably my own strong point, but I like, for customers and clients, I go back and say, okay, what are emails that people have bought from me before? Where are emails that people have responded to? Where have I gotten a lot of click-throughs? Where on my Instagram am I seeing tons of comments or engagement, or even, views? Like, starting to kind of look at that too. And can you start matching some of what's performed well in the past along with what I said before about all of those kind of voice of customer things?
Okay, I want to unpack some of these great points that you're saying right now, that if you're stuck, it's likely because you don't have enough information. And that's always what happens to me. If I'm working through a campaign or I'm looking at emails, I'm hitting up Megan O'Leary, who's been on the podcast, my copywriting partner in crime, and she's always asking me questions. Well, what are they feeling right now? What are they going through? What do you have? Like, what kind of information, right? And then I have to dig deeper into their inner psyches. Inevitably, I have to go back, right? Because I haven't done this research that you're talking about. I haven't dug in enough, right? And if we haven't dug in enough, like, what do we do? Like, do more surveys, additional information? Like, what advice do you have?
Yeah, I think it's going back. I love surveys. Can you get onto the phone with a couple of, not only current clients or people that have taken your course, but I've asked people to get on the phone with me that have, like, that didn't buy, that seemed interested, and just say, hey, can I pick your brain and ask you why you're not buying? What's holding you back? Because then too, sometimes the problem with, like, a voice of customer is that, like, on a survey, we won't be able to get into, like, the deeper answers when we actually have a conversation with someone. You're able to go and really ask deeper questions. And then too, I would ask, like, I know I have a lot of, like, friends who are in the same industry, people that are kind of interested in what I do. And I like Voxer. If you have, like, a couple of Voxer friends, when I decided to launch my own new my new program, I was like, can I ask you, or my new one-on-one service, I should say, I started saying, can I ask you, like, what's held you back from, like, planning your pre-launch content? Why haven't you done this? Why haven't you done that? And that was able to not only help me plan my actual, launch sales page and emails, but it helps me go back and start planning my pre-launch, because now I know what I need to say. I know where they're at in their awareness journey, like where they're at and where I need to move them to, so that they're ready to buy. And not only ready to buy, they're excited to buy, because obviously when we go and do this really well, they think of it as, gosh, this is going to be the answer to the problems I've been having, and I want this course now. And that's the place that we want to get people into.
Okay, great. So I've done that research. I've got the data in front of me. I'm aware of that voice. I'm in it. Now what? Now what do I do in terms of what's the next step for the pre-launch?
Well, I think for everyone, it's the same but different, right? So obviously it's like, okay, what channels are you on? Where are you on Instagram? Are you doing Facebook Lives? Do you have a weekly podcast? So when I've gone through with clients before, I always like to start with, like, the authority hub. Where is, like, the main piece of information every week? Where are we going to start? So my last client I just worked with, hers was, she not only did she do a podcast, but she also did a Facebook Live. I have had other ones that they've only are doing Facebook Live. So I kind of start and say, okay, what's like the big message that we need to get across this week? What is like, let's say this week is all about, which objection is really big that we need to overcome and talk about from different angles. And so I always start there. And then depending on, what you're doing, and let me back up for a minute too. I think it's very interesting doing this with one-on-one with clients that I've noticed is that we think we know as a course creator a lot of times what our plan is. But when I sit down and start actually asking them like, okay, when is your launch? Are you doing a webinar event? Well, how does your webinar event line up to your launch? How does all this content before this all start to line up? So in their minds, and then a lot of times I say, okay, well, did you realize when we go 6 weeks back, then all of a sudden you're launching over spring break, right? Even just sitting down to start is just looking at the dates and getting a calendar and just saying, okay, what date am I launching? Am I doing a webinar event? How long do I need to fill up that webinar or that boot camp or whatever type of pre-launch event? Not that you have to have one. And then going and stepping back from there. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh gosh, I really need to I need some time around this launch. So I think I should have said that at first is really looking at your calendar first. Once you can look at your calendar, now we can go, okay, what are these big objections? What are the biggest beliefs that we need help shifting? How can we empathize with these clients? What type of case studies do we need to collect? We can look at that and say, let's create authority content. And then from there, figure out, am I doing, and once again, this is somewhat logistical, but do I need to send 2 emails a week? Am I, how many Instagram posts am I doing? Am I doing things on LinkedIn? I don't do LinkedIn well, so I don't know exactly what you do on there. But, all of this stuff starts to add up. And then we can kind of like map out a structure of what needs to be created beforehand going into your course launch.
Okay. All right. So we've got the data, then we've set up the calendar, then we're looking at the beliefs or the objections, and then we're mapping out the structure. Some kind of wireframe like that. And then what is your favorite way to pre-launch? Is it lives? Is it having an event? Like what's the biggest bang for our buck, do you think, in terms of pre-launching?
I think when it comes to like that authority content, I think anytime you can have some type of live component, where where people are showing up, I definitely think there's a difference in like the energy and the feel of someone, So in the pre-launch into, I really like always with my clients, I'm like, we have to get you in front of video once a week, one way or another, right? Yeah, we have to do some sort of live, some sort of Instagram, and then possibly, depending on what we're trying to sell, doing some type of live launch event. I've had clients that have done 3-day challenges. I have one that I'm working with right now. She's going to actually do a webinar. But I think the more that you can kind of get your face out there, and in some ways, it actually makes your pre-launching life a little bit easier, in my opinion, because when you can get out and talk about it, and this is coming from a copywriter, but when I can get out and start talking to people and having conversations, doing lives, there's like stuff in your head you don't even know, like the good stuff comes out. And then you can actually easily repurpose it into other forms of content. So I think that even though some people may be intimidated to go onto video from time to time, and when I first started this business, I was terrified. I remember being terrified of doing an Instagram story, and now I'm on video constantly. So the more you do it, the more you get used to it. With that being said, though, I really do think that having a live component one way or another makes a big difference.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I want to ask you about mistakes that you see with pre-launches. And I think one of the biggest ones that I see is that people just not allowing space for it, time, energy, and space, and doing a proper pre-launch. But what are you seeing? What mistakes have we been making?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think not doing one, right? I think people, and it's launching is never like easy. I think sometimes people want to be like, oh, you do this and this, you follow my plan, and all of a sudden it's easy. I think it can be easier. I think we can simplify the process. I do think creating a really amazing pre-launch makes your launch life 100% more easier.
Yeah.
but it's not necessarily you just like snap your fingers and then all of a sudden things just fall together, as you and I both know.
Yeah.
So I'd say the biggest mistake is that it's funny. Speaking of voice of customer, my friend Deepshika, one time I asked her this exact question, and she was like, either I focus so much on the launch that I can't focus on the pre-launch, or I get a little bit too much into the weeds of the pre-launch and I don't focus on the launch enough. However, I think the second part of that is really the exception to the rule. I think most people just don't have the time. There's so many things that go into it, and by not properly planning, it's really hard to be doing pre-launch content at the same time you're trying to think about your launch if you're not ahead a little bit. So I think that is definitely what you said. I think it's just the lack of planning, and I think too it's going into the lack of like, I don't know what to say, so I haven't done enough research up front, so all of a sudden I'm just kind of throwing stuff out thinking I'm talking, but I'm not actually being truly strategic about what needs to be said during the pre-launch period.
Okay, I love that you highlighted this because I think it's so important, going back to your step one and having those data points and knowing the content that you're speaking to and knowing the flow that you're going to speak to it. Amy Porterfield, I know you're an Amy Porterfield fan, right? Is a freaking genius at this. When I used to work at our podcast and collaborating with her on that and saying, okay, this is where we're going to start, and this is where we're going to take them, and this is how we're going to get them there with different podcast episodes or different pieces of content, I think we don't spend enough time on that. Like, I think you really need to drill down on that and figure out what that meaningful content looks like.
100%. And I also think that, so I work on quizzes some of the time with my friends, Linda Studio and Emily Reagan, and so I know a little, I don't want to say like I know no way a disc expert, but I've spent a lot of time looking at personalities and thinking about them. And there's a blog by People Keys, and I think this is really interesting too when it comes to pre-launch. So there's 4 types of personalities, right? There's your dominant, the influencer, like you're the life of the party. There's the steady, the more emotional person. And then there is the compliant and the conscientious. And I was doing some research recently, and my friend Emily actually helped me find this stat, but I was shocked to learn that only 3% of people are dominant and 11% are influencers, according to this blog, right? That means 14% of people are what we would call quick action takers, according to the DISC profile. That means, I can't do my math very well on the podcast, but that means most of us are people who are slow decision makers and need time to process. So there's an assumption that we can have this amazing product, right? We can have this great launch email set up, a great launch time, but we're not giving people time to process in a 7 to 10 day launch period. I mean, some launches are 5 days. Like we take and then we think, oh no, our launch failed. Like, why didn't my launch go? And it's just the basic human fact that people need some time around their decisions. And I think with everything that's gone on in this world and how saturated the online market. I mean, I don't think it's like so saturated you can't get in, but I do think there's been a saturation because of what's gone on, that you just need more time around getting your messaging out there.
Yeah,
and we're all creating content anyway, right? Like, why not just do it strategically?
Yeah, I 100% agree. And by the way, the disc, that's Tony Robbins coming from that world. We all took the disc.
Oh, did you?
So yeah, and I had no idea it was so high for the S&C. As you can imagine, the Tony Robbins world, we had a lot of D and high I and high D, a lot of high I. So as you can imagine in that world. So this reminder that, it's a nurture, right? It's takes time for people to buy from you, and it's not automatic, and that's what the pre-launch really helps you with. So that's a great reminder. You said earlier, there's a streamlined way to do this, right? Like there's a lot of steps. Are there a few tips that you could leave us with to make this process easier for ourselves?
100%. So I think that, first of all, if you're just getting consistent content out before your launch, like you're doing amazing, right? Like, let's just, you're winning, right? If you're just getting your emails out and you're showing up, like, it's kind of, even me, I'm not exactly having a pre-launch right now, but I took a moment where I was like, I had like a week or a couple of weeks this last January where I was like, oh, I feel like I'm not doing all these things I should be doing. And my business coach was like, no one notices, right? Like you're just getting
Yeah,
yourself out
right.
there. So just keep in mind, like part of this is, yes, I want you to be strategic and have a plan, but truly what ends up happening to so many course creators and coaches that go through this is that they get so bogged down with the launch that they just ignore it. So the first thing is like, if you're just getting consistent content out there, you're doing great. The second is going back to that repurposing. Like if you can just come up with like general themes for the week, if you are creating one piece of authority type of content and you're able to simply repurpose, I'll give you an example. Let's say you are doing, you're doing a live once a week. That's what your main authority content is. So maybe you have 3 points that you talk about in that. So all of a sudden those 3 points can be, you can actually break those down into separate Instagram posts. Maybe you're simply sending out an email reminding people to go watch that video. You're not having to construct an email, right? We're just thinking of ways that we can kind of go in from different angles and create something once, and actually kind of just repurpose it in different ways. But once again, going back to like, okay, the thing that will be simple is if you are collecting voice of data all along, all of a sudden, if you have this outline of what you need to be talking about, then it becomes really easy. When I go through and do this for clients, I have a bit of a process that I go through, but I'm like, okay, yep, this is what we need to do do our live on this week. And now that I know these points, these are the points that we're going to actually break down in different ways. So I'm looking at different ways and angles to use the same information, which actually compounds what you're doing, right? Because all of a sudden too, and you're not only are you repurposing, but you're compounding the efforts and you're reinforcing the messaging that you already have. And I also think too, if something doesn't go super great during this pre-launch period, you have a week of content that doesn't seem to be going anywhere, then you somehow missed the mark. Like there's something that's not connecting right. Or what I've seen a lot of times is that during this pre-launch process, we actually discover a ton about people and what they will react to. And we get like, oh, we didn't realize like this was something that we need to talk about. Maybe we need to finagle this next, live to talk more on that. So I think too, once the process comes that you're just putting this stuff out here, it creates such like a beautiful momentum going into your launch and a confidence also that, that it actually simplifies your launch altogether, because all of a sudden now you're going in with incredible momentum.
There you go. So many great tips. Thank you. Thank you for being on, Brenna. Where can we learn more about you and your work?
You can find me at brennamcgowan.co, and I'm also on Instagram at brennamcgowan.co, and I hang out there a little bit more than I should, so come say hi to me.
Definitely come say hi. Thank you so much for taking time. I know you're a busy lady. Thanks for being on.
Thank you for having me.
All right, what did you think about Brenna? I thought she gave a lot of great insights about how to get into the mindset of our ideal student and really love on them as a run-up to your launch. Please check out Brenna and all the incredible work she's doing at brennamcgowan.co. All right, I will be back next week with more course creation and marketing tips. Make sure that you are subscribed so you don't miss one tiny morsel. Until next week, go create, be you and be brilliant, and get it done.